All right, and it's recording. Thank you so much for coming on a Saturday. We really, really appreciate all your time. Thank you guys as well for being here. And I will pass it on to Shay Curtis. Thank you so much.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for watching me talk. I really appreciate it, inviting me here. So my name's Shay Curtis. I am a character designer and storyboard artist and director and show pitcher creator. And I've worked in the industry for over 10 years. I've worked in Canada and in the US. I'm originally Canadian, which is why I've worked in both. And I've worked on shows like Star versus the Forces of Evil, Amphibia, Big City Greens, and most recently Frog and Toad on Apple. And I've done some development work I've had my own show over at Nickelodeon, which didn't get picked up. Still salty about that. And I've done some development at Disney. So yeah, I've bounced around quite a bit, and I've worked in preschool, and I've worked in 6 to 11 kids content, and yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you about character design. I have a bunch of stuff prepared that because I also teach this character design class on Project City. So I was like, oh, I'm just going to use some of the stuff that I teach to talk about character design. So yeah, I'm just going to I thought it'd be really fun to first kind of go through an episode of Star versus the Forces of Evil from script to drawing and handing things in, and kind of show everybody step by step the process of like a day in the life of a character designer working on a TV show. And then I was going to show the Bible. It's called a show Bible for Amphibia. And then I'd love to just do an open Q&A and talk about character design in the industry and anything that your heart desires. That's what I'm here for. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen. Oh, you guys already have questions. Okay, I'm gonna let them pile up, and then I'm gonna answer them at the end. So I'm not stopping every 2 seconds. But I'm gonna share my screen. You're gonna see my super messy desktop. So going to basically when you okay, let's just say you just got hired to be a character designer on Star versus the show, but let's just say Star versus the Forces of Evil. So the first thing, so you basically, the writers, are writing scripts, and the board artists are going to be boarding these full scripts. This one is actually, this is an outline. This isn't actually a script. Star was like an outline driven show, which means that you can see it's like big chunks of, it's kind of like act one, and it's only a couple of chunks of like what they basically want to happen, but there's room for dialogue and changing a lot of stuff, which happened. This is the Gustav episode from season 1, which I thought was a really fun episode, and I got to design some cool stuff on it. So yeah, so this is basically what the storyboard artist will get. And sometimes character designers have enough time to kind of read over this and pick out like, oh, okay, Gustav, that's like a brand new character. This character has not been designed yet. And you can kind of start picking out like areas that you can kind of see, like if there's going to be a new outfit, or like it's hard to tell right now before the boards are done, but you can kind of see like if there's like going to be like like even here, like, oh, like a meatball is tossed into Marco's mouth, like that's probably going to be like a really funny pose, and that's probably something that the character designer is going to have to do a special pose of, which I will talk about. So yeah, basically this will get hand it over to the board artists. And then next is, sometimes we do like some previs, like stuff that's like, oh, okay, like this isn't in the show, but I just thought it'd be funny to like draw Gustav riding a wolf and like just trying to like figure out maybe what he could look like. Like this was kind of like a first pass exploration of Gustav next to Star and Marco, you know, trying to see how tall he is compared to the other two. So this is kind of all happening while boards are being done. If you're lucky enough and have enough time in the schedule, sometimes they're just like, here's the episode. And you're like, I'm trying to explore who this character is. Here's like, you know, another one with he's wearing a different kind of hat and just kind of roughing it out. And his backpack's a lot bigger. So while that's happening, the board artists are boarding out this episode. So this is kind of like after the whole board has been done, you'll see like the times of days and their page numbers, and this is really good for the art director and the painters, so they know like, okay, like from scenes 1 to 25 it's going to be morning light, so you can't paint those backgrounds like it's the evening or the daytime. They have to be painted in like a very nice warm morning light. And same for like cloudy day, same for gloomy and raining. Like that means that those backgrounds are going to be more blue or gloomy. And then Star had 3 main outfits, which actually I will show you here. This was outfit A, this was outfit B, and this was outfit C. So each episode, like sometimes she usually wears one of these dresses an episode. It's pretty rare that she'll change from like outfit A to outfit B. But this was really useful for the board artists to, so you'll see here, like, actually, you know what? Look at that. She wears outfit A and C. Okay, this episode it happens. And there's also a nightgown. So we don't have her in a nightgown yet. We had to design that for this episode. That was like a new thing for her. But you know, when we get this, we're like, okay, great. Like it's good for everybody to know, to keep everything on track, to be like, cool, from scenes 26 to scenes 41, she's in dress A. We know what dress A looks like. But basically, so here's like the boards, and the board artist drew her just kind of like loosely in this like nightgown-esque thing. You know, it has like these fun sleeves that are just kind of like ruffled. So we would get this as character designers and be like, okay, like we like these ruffle sleeves, they're pretty cute. What else can we do here? Like we're gonna add something, like, so we basically have to take her model sheet, which I'll show you in a minute, and draw this nightgown in a pretty way that matches the board, but also matches the style of the show. Here's another scene where they're all wearing party hats. That's something that we'd have to put on the characters and put on their rotations. So each one of these characters has like a 6-point rotation, which is like front, 3/4 front, side, 3/4 back, like all views of them. So we would, like anytime there's like a new prop, like a prop or like something they wear, like a backpack or a hat or a new jacket, that usually means like, okay, like you're gonna have to draw that little party hat on all 3 of these characters on all of their rotations. So when board artists add lots of little things, like there's some moments where it's like, you know what, the show's getting like, it's too crazy, there's too many hats, it's too expensive, they're not gonna be wearing hats. But for this episode, we're like, you know what, let's put them in those cute little party hats, why not? So you'll see here, like now they're in profile views of these hats. So this is where it comes in handy to draw the hats on many different angles for the animators. So the animators know, like, what do these hats look like from the back? So nobody's guessing. We basically, like character designers also help give a lot of information. So the animators don't have to do any kind of guesswork and make their jobs a lot easier too. this was probably a prop, even though it has a character on it. Sometimes character design kind of helps out with this too, where they'll be like, hey, can you just draw a star in this pose? And then we will, and then they kind of do the rest. Here, so also what character designers do besides doing rotations and clothes and outfits is special poses. And a special pose is something like this, where she's kind of making like a funny mouth, and she's going like, oh, you know, like she's like very emotional, trying to hold it back, and there's tears in her eyes. And so, you know, we don't want the animators to have to guess what this is going to look like. So us as character designers, we will take this and draw it like super on model, like exactly what we want, while still trying to like keep the beauty in the lines of the board. So it has like, it matches its energy. But so yeah, Star had a lot of special poses, which I will, oh yeah, here's the introduction of Gustav. Cute handshake. This is nicely posed out. Like sometimes, you know, like this drawing of Marco might be a special pose, because it's like, well, how big do we want his butt to be? Like if we give this to the animators, they might literally just actually draw his butt like this. So, you know, this is something that we'd have to like give more information on, so they're not guessing. Actually, let me make this bigger. I'm not gonna go through this whole storyboard. I'm just gonna point out some ones. You'll get like the gist of it. So like right now you can tell that like Star is not in her nightgown. She's supposed to be in her nightgown. So sometimes this was something like a revisionist would have to do. They'd have to like draw Star in her nightgown to match like these earlier scenes of her where she was clearly in her nightgown, like a minute ago. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you just tell the animators, like, by the way, for these scenes, please put it in her nightgown. Let's see if I can find another. Oh, here's another good example. So as a character designer, you will get this image and they will say, now you must fill in all of these picture frames with artwork, because they're technically they're characters, you know. So this is what the board artist drew. It's, you know, it's pretty, like there's some that I'd be like, yeah, a llama, like that's cute, or like this one. Might change this up a little bit as a character designer, like especially the ones that are just silhouettes. So it's pretty fun. It gives you a lot of room to like play, and you don't have to like completely trace what the board artist did. Here's another example. So he's getting a Viking hat, and now we need a whole rotation of him in this new Viking hat. Plugs into the wall. There, she's back in her nightgown. Here, this also, this little cute bear, that's a new character. Because it's like a one-time gag, where this is like a one-time character, we're never going to see it again. It's all he does is just float for the most part, and then do this. And same with this bear. Usually we don't have to do like a full rotation on this. It would just be like this pose and this pose. This is actually a special pose of him holding the bear, because again, we don't want the animators to guess anything. We want to draw exactly what Gustav looks like holding this little bear. This also beautiful special pose that character designer will have to redraw, even though it's so beautiful already. Here's another one. See, so this is what I was talking about with Marco. Remember in the script, it was like Gustav flings a meatball and Marco catches it in his mouth. His mouth is full of meatballs. It's like very puffy. So we're gonna have to draw Marco with big puffy cheeks and see what that looks like. And we have to draw Marco with his mouth open with puffy cheeks, catching the meatball like this. Again, because we don't want the animators to literally draw this. It's a little too rough. So as a character designer, your job is going to be to take this pose and put him really, really on model, but also make it look exactly like this board is trying. It's a very specific talent a character designer has to have. So that's pretty much the gist of it. Like the rest of the board it's all the same stuff. You know, now we need like the meatball hat the Viking hat with meatballs on it. Now that's like a different drawing now with now you have to draw the Viking hat on him with the meatballs, probably rotate it. So this goes on and on for 11 minutes. But after that, it's now your job as a character designer. So you usually get a whole breakdown of what you need to draw. This is not for this episode. I couldn't find the character breakdown actually for the Gustav episode. I'm very sorry, but this is an example of what we would get for but like let's just say it would say like, you know, all stars outfits, and then star a nightgown, Gustav with shirtless, Gustav, like they would just list everything I just said right here. And then it would kind of show like sometimes if you have 2 character designers or 3 character designers, like you'll get things assigned to you, so you don't have to do the whole episode by yourself. Sometimes you have to do whole episodes by yourself if it's a smaller show. So now let's go into what I was kind of talking about, where so here's the rotation of Star in her nightgown. This is what we decided on, where we still get these like little ruffled sleeves, just like the board artist had drawn. But we added this little moon detail, and we added some more little details in the collar and down here. We just thought it looked nicer. Here's that pose I was talking about, oh my gosh. So, you know, it's we changed a couple of things. You know, we added like little tears in the sides and changed the mouth just like a little bit, but basically it's traced over the board artist drawing and just tweaked and tightened up a bit. The board artist made her arms really long. Some shows like Adventure Time, for example, they really, really want you to like make it look like the board artist drawing, like even if it's off model. So that's why you'll see a lot of shows like, let's just say Adventure Time, where you'll be like, oh, that's a Rebecca Sugar episode because Finn like looks a little like squatter or his eyes are further apart. Like some shows are really into keeping things off model, off model to the board artist style close. This show was pretty good at that. You'll see like some episodes you're like, oh my gosh, like that's such a Ian drawing, or that's such a Carrie drawing. But we still try and rein it in a little bit. Like these arms were just a little too long for you know, the art directors. They wanted us to kind of scale it back a little bit, but still keep that same energy of the pose. Here's a nice Gustav rotation. Need that little open mouth sideways, so you can see kind of what his open mouth looks like sideways. Here's him in a chef hat. Here's him ripping his shirt off. Yeah, really, this one, the board was so good. It didn't have to do much. Just added more details of the shirt ripping and his like belt and stuff. Here's what I was talking about. It was like, okay, here's the meatballs on the thing. Here's Marco. Again, like you can see how the arms were like really like skinny here. We, you know, made it more a model of his like sweatshirt and put all the details back in. Here's another special pose of like meatballs flying at him. Here's that rotation with the Viking helmet. We didn't have to do a full rotation. We kind of call it, these are like mini rotations, where it's like, okay, like we get the point of it. It's not that complicated of a hat. Here's another special pose. Look, you can see here, like the drawing is pretty crazy. Like kind of looks like a shark. Like it's super funny, you know, but we couldn't do that. It felt just like way too cartoony for the show. So kind of gave him this more regular, like open mouth, like Snoopy Like looks like a kind of like a Charlie Brown like, kind of thing. Yeah, this was like a moment where she later in the episode she had like a night mask on that was like up and pushed her hair back. So kind of did that as a special pose because it's so different from the board. We just wanted to show the animators like, hey, actually she's wearing her night mask. Oh, so you can see that. Here's her hanging off a tree. So I don't have to draw the props. This tree counts as background and these goggles count as prop. So this would be this special pose is then given to the prop designer and then they will put in the goggles, or whatever they're called. The spy goggles. Forgot the word. So that's kind of a relief because like I'm not great at drawing props all the time. So I get to kind of just show them like exactly where they would go. Another special pose where really tried to keep Carrie, this is the board artist who's named Carrie, tried to keep her like energy, where she has this like crazy hair and like the eyes and the eyebrows, but just again scaling it back to be on model. But like when you see this, you're like, oh my gosh, it's such a Carrie drawing. Here too, like there's she just loves drawing like really long limbs, which is really funny. Like another board artist probably would have drawn this pose like very differently. But again, this was her episode. She boarded it. So we wanted to make these drawings feel like hers. While again, like look how skinny her legs are here. Just put them back on model. Put her back in her, I think this was dress C. So we had to make sure that like the animators knew like, okay, she's not just wearing like a random dress, like it has to be this dress. So, when you get this pose, you have to kind of round out like her upper part and just get everything, way more on model. This funny Gustav pose, the penguin, it has to be on, it's like a separate thing because it's going to be colored separately. More special poses. Your job as a character designer really is mostly doing special poses. There's some cool episodes where you can do like a lot of background characters, which are some of my favorites. I love special poses too, but sometimes it could be a little tedious. Here's another one. I want to show like exactly how many sticks are in her hair and how many leaves, and animators aren't guessing. There's another one where see this red outline, that's going to be a prop. Same with her little wand, that's a prop, but they already have that designed. It's just showing them where it's going to be. Oh yeah, here's kind of an example of like drawing. I think I have two of these. Yeah, so we didn't know like what version the art directors and the showrunner would want. It's like, do we keep him closer to the board and kind of like chunky like this? Or do we slim him down? So that was kind of a back and forth debate. I think we went with this one ultimately. Like this one, I think they thought it felt a little too chunky. Oh yeah, look at that. Looks like it's like kind of in between both actually. Is a great special pose. Not a Carrie drawing at all. This is another board artist. And I don't know if you guys could tell, like, again, you haven't seen it that much, but just like the line weight and line quality and everything, like it's definitely like, I don't know, I don't think Carrie would have drawn him this way, but sometimes after a board artist is done, stuff gets changed and directors come in and like this was that director drawing. So here's some background characters. So, we kind of kept it pretty close to what the board artist did, kept this same kind of dog. We didn't change the dog really too much, just added some detail, changed this guy's hair a little bit. We really tried to keep the energy of the pose. This guy, that's this one here in the back, kept kind of like the swoopy hair, made it more of like a bulldog. I think these are people from like Warrington or something. And so, yeah, like sometimes you don't want to change it too much, like from the storyboard, because then it's just really confusing for the animators to be like, wait, you gave me like, let's say, for example, if this was like a cat and this was like a woman with pigtails, and then suddenly you drew this, they're kind of like, well, okay, that's kind of a stretch. So, we try and keep it as close to the board as possible. Yeah, here I circled because this guy's super tiny. Even though they're super, super tiny, you still got to draw them in full detail. There's this window guy. There's her right in the back there. Here's a nice family portrait of everybody. So this is something that you have to do also as a character designer, just, to draw like characters like hugging and interacting with each other. And you have to really know how to draw like every single member of the family in multiple faces and poses. Yeah, here we kind of changed the chef jacket a little bit to make it more of like the classical chef jacket. Yeah, here's another example of like 3 background characters where they don't really do much. They kind of just open the door and they're like, Gustav. So we didn't have to do full rotations on them, thank goodness. If they walked around more and like had more lines and did more, we'd have to do like either like probably a full rotation. Luckily, we didn't have to do that. So this guy, I kept him pretty close to the board. I just gave him curly hair, kind of, filled it out a little more and changed his mustache a bit. Gustav looks pretty much the same there. This little girl, I thought she was really cute, so I kept it really similar. Changed this to a little cat, just because Star has so many hearts on her. It was just kind of like, let's just not do too many hearts for other people other than Star. She gets all the hearts. So we gave her a little kitten. And then the mom, really, really similar to the mom in the board. I know it's pretty light, but give her this like short bob. And it's as a board artist, if you draw really on style of the show, it makes the character designer's life a lot easier, because you can kind of just take what's there because it's so beautiful already and just enhance it instead of having to like completely redesign. If it was just like a stick figure, it's like, oh God, now I gotta design this from scratch completely, which is super fun. But if you have a week to do everything I just showed you, then you're like, come on, board artist, give me something to work on, not just a stick figure. Here's that one I was telling you about. So there's a lot of, this is where character designers love putting inside jokes. There's a little Canadian. This guy was not in the storyboard. I added this because I'm Canadian and I thought it would be cute. Here's that llama, but we moved him. There's like a little robot I used to like drawing. So this is like a good place that a lot of people sometimes put like their friends or like their family or their own pets, just because it's just easier to like, it's just cute. It's just a fun thing for like people on the crew to like know about, that like this shot is like a 1 second shot or like 2 second shot. People won't care, but we care. This is how we find joy, is putting little jokes in the background that are cute. Yeah, here's an example. I think the other character designer had to do this. She had to draw all these Gustav poses, every single one of these. Yeah. And this is the layout. And this is like the board. This is for like the painters. All right. So that basically is, and this is what props look like. So it showed the bag up, showed the bag down on the ground. Prop design's a whole different job. Here's the floating backpack. I don't know what scene this was from, but this is how the prop designer would draw it. So that's basically, then you hand it all in and then you do it all over again every 2 weeks. So it's really fun. It could also be really intense depending on the show and if you get a lot of notes. Here's the, so also after, usually before, this is the Bible, they're called series Bibles. This one is the one that we sent to the animation studios. Usually during production, like before everything is sent to the animation studios, and usually the storyboard artists and the internal crew will get like kind of a smaller version of this, like just enough information for us to like storyboard properly. Like it'll show like what spray looks like, what Anne looks like, what some backgrounds look like, but this is like the most in-depth show Bible. And it takes a long time to make. As you can see, here's the actually, let me zoom in here. Like there's so many pages that there's a table of contents. So basically it's kind of showing the animation studio, like this is what our backgrounds look like, and this is how our backgrounds are painted, and these are some kind of like main location backgrounds. This is something the art director made about the blur guide of the backgrounds. So like the closer you get to these characters, like the backgrounds get more blurry. So it's not like the characters are super clear and the background's equally as clear. It just makes it more beautiful and gives you more focus on the characters. So this is like them kind of teaching the animation studio, because sometimes the animation studio has to do backgrounds on their own. They don't, like Disney doesn't supply every single background. So here's just kind of showing different beautiful painted backgrounds, because it's kind of teaching them also like the painting style, because they're going to have to paint some backgrounds too in the black and white. It's crazy like how different how simple the black and white can look, and then how like just with like lighting and shadows, just how filled out it looks. But anyways, we're talking about character design. I know. I just want to show you just how beautiful this is, because it's stuff that like doesn't get shown a lot online, and I really wish more shows would just like release this stuff so everybody could just see how gorgeous it is, because the artist put a lot of time into this. This is like the floor plan, which is great for storyboard artists. We love getting this. It just helps us a lot with like staging and like knowing where everything is and how to like have characters move around a room. So it's super helpful. Usually the art director will do this. Beautiful night shots. So I'm just gonna go through this a little quicker. So yeah, so here's like a full colored rotation of grime. This is season 1 stuff. So yeah, they're gonna show like all of the main characters. There's Marcy. There's the mayor. These ones don't get full, they didn't show the full rotation of these ones, but you'll see like when we get to, yeah, we got our, Anne gets like a full rotation. I'm not sure why she doesn't have one. I'm not sure why Sasha doesn't have a full rotation, because I know it exists, but maybe for this pitch for the model pack, it's called Bible or model pack, they didn't show it. But yeah, here's like an example of a full like 6-point turn. Some style guides talking about eyebrows, how they're only visible for certain expressions. So that's something that Matt Brawley, he's the showrunner, he was very picky about. Here's a really cool expression page, which is so fun for the character designer to do. We did this on Star also, but we pulled a lot of like board artist drawings, just because board artists like to draw like so expressively and do poses that you would never even like thought of as a character designer. Frog hands. Character designers gotta do frog hands. You gotta do a page of hands to show how the hands move and work. There's Hot Pop's full rotation. A nice expression sheet for him. These are also great stuff to put in your portfolios. I gotta say, if you do like a rotation of your character and then do this really nice expression sheet, doesn't have to be colored even. It's great. We love to see that. Our directors love to see it. Some human hands, 5 fingers. None of this 4-finger business for Amphibia. Here's Polly expression sheet. Just showing like really varied expressions and how big her mouth can get and how small it can get. There's Sprig's rotation sheet. They added some cute little like extra poses for him. And there his expression sheet. great for board artists too. It really helps us to like see this as well, even before, just to like know how like, oh, how are the goggles placed in like different poses. He gets 2 expression sheets. This is the storyboard artist Drew Applegate. That's very him. It's one of his poses. This is a mouth chart. So this is what, because it was done traditionally, this show, they use like their own kind of mouth chart in Korea. So like basically like the words M and B, like moo or baby, this is what her frowny face, M and B would sound like, and it's labeled A because then like on the animation sheet, like when someone's timing out like her saying like baby, they'll put like A, and then they'll put probably D and then A again, you know, so like instead of having to like spell everything out, it's just easier to like jump to these main poses for the main mouth. It's like the main mouth shapes that every character kind of has on a show. And it's like, oh, ooh, F, ooh, like lazy. I love doing mouth charts. I think they're so fun. And there's a happy one. So it's the same letters, but just happier. And then Hop Pop gets one, happy. And you can kind of jump between them. It's like animated. Here's Polly's. That's Briggs. So usually, like this is for the main characters. I think because like Sprig's mouth is so similar to like some of the other characters' mouths, like they can kind of just use this as reference. Now we're getting more into like props. And here's like a size comp of all the characters. We do a lot of size comps. Like every time there's a new character, you gotta like put them against the main cast of characters. We gotta see how big or small they are. Here's that main lineup. So again, as a board artist, this is super, every board artist you'll see has like a lineup size comp posted up on their desk or somewhere, because it's really important that you get their sizes right. Just so it, you know, you don't want suddenly like, because people online call you out on this stuff too. Like, do you ever see people like screen cap stuff and be like, why is Steven tiny here? And why is Steven Universe like huge in this shot? And it's like, yeah, because we probably didn't follow the size chart properly in this episode. I don't mind it. I don't kind of care when they change sizes a little bit, but some people are very, very picky. And the show is very, very picky about it. Here's another example of special poses I was talking about. So this was the board down here, and this was the special pose done for it. So you can really see like they really, really tried to keep the energy of the storyboard, but you know, put the leaves back in her hair and the logos and stuff. And you know, the way Sprig's mouth kind of moves, it's like a little too big here. So they kind of put that back on model. This is a funny one also. Sometimes character designers gotta do a little bit of lighting stuff. Sometimes that goes to painting. I think it just depends on the production and the pipeline. Here's another super cute one where it's like, yeah, it just this funny little tongue, the way that's done, like they just really liked it. They're like, yep, keep that exactly the way it is, but just put everything a little more on model. And that's Hannah Ayubi. That's her board. You could tell like immediately just the way she draws. It's so charming. It's so cute. So yeah, I feel like this one maybe a little less. This show put things off model. Like maybe if this was a different show, they would actually make Anne's face look a little closer to this. But I think Matt wanted to keep a lot of stuff more like contained, a little more on model. This is one of my drawings. They did a really fun job of putting like all of the different season 1 board artists, like putting their drawings in the, like just to show like, okay, like look how rough this is. And usually I don't draw this rough. I'm actually a little embarrassed they picked this drawing, but I think it's a good example of her like completely splayed out to show like, this is how she should look. Like, look, she has 5 fingers on her hands and 5 toes. Not this. here we're talking about the shadow guide and how the shadows work, and this is art director stuff. This is another example of a special pose. So this is a super, super funny drawing. I love it, but they're like, no, like we're not just giving her like 2 teeth and like dirt on her face. Like we have to put this more on model. Like let's keep it really funny, but this was too much. So again, just showing the animation studio, like, okay, even though you see this, like, please draw this one. Don't do this. But the character designer really, really kept the energy of that pose. There's another one of my wonderful drawings that made it in there. They changed, yeah, I did like, they kind of followed a little bit of the lighting I did, where I put this like really like this glow on him. They kept that in there. Yeah, here's some more, just another great special pose where they were like, okay, yeah, these eyes are cute, but like, how do we make them even more cute and sad and wobbly and adorable? So they didn't totally follow the eyes here. They kind of took liberties and did their own thing. And then here they kind of scaled it back, which is interesting. Like here they pushed it, and then here they were like, this is too much, scale it back. So they didn't do Anne's like big googly eyes. They really, for whatever reason, maybe the scene needed it more. They thought it was just too much. And that's the full Bible for Amphibia. I could also show you, this was something given to board artists on, okay, the show used to be called Country Club. Little hot fact there. Before Big City Greens, it was called Country Club for the longest time, and we had a really hard time calling it Big City Greens. It took a while. So I think these might be online, I'm not sure, but this is just like a really fun little guide. And this is something that character designers really have to do. Also, they have to think about all the rules of the show and like, how do we draw, like, what are the rules of our show? We get to choose that. Like how blinks work, how, like you could see here, like they really don't mind hands being like loose and only 4 fingers and little swirlies, whereas Amphibia would have been like, no, absolutely not. We do not do that on our show. They only like his pupils pretty thick. Only this, I think, is only maybe for like a very exaggerated pose. They were very picky about this part of his face, like his forehead. If you drew it wrong, it looked like really, really wrong. And then, you know, the teeth are always centered in the middle of the face, like little tiny rules that you wouldn't even think about until you had to draw him like 1,000 times. That make you realize like, oh yeah, like that is a more like appealing, like it's a really good shorthand to like know that there's like, if you draw a line in the middle of his face, like the middle of his teeth will always hit that line. Here's some more rules about his hair. See, this one's right, this one's wrong. It's too widow's peaky. So if you drew this as a character designer, they'd be very mad at you. They'd be like, no, you did it wrong. You got to draw it perfectly on model, perfectly like this. Yeah, Bill, just kind of showing Bill construction. And this is from season 1, so this is like way more updated now. I think Bill looks actually a little different. Like I think his body shape's a little less like short and squat like this. Yeah, same with like Tilly and some cute little rules. Like think about how a hand puppet works, like for her mouth, because her mouth was like kind of weird, like a little beak. Yeah, here's some drawing do's and don'ts. But you know, when you're doing your own design work, like in your own, you're kind of figuring out your own style, and like let's just say you were like, I'm gonna do like, for my portfolio, I'm gonna draw like characters in my style. And if you kind of like think about these rules for like your own character designs and being like, yeah, like the mouths have to be round, like no sharp mouths for these amount of characters for this like fake show that I'm making for my portfolio. Like that stuff's great to like really think about and keep in mind, because as character designers, like we notice that stuff right away, where it's like, oh, check out this lineup for my new show, and like here's the guy and here's the girl, and if we see that they look like super different, or like oh, how come like all these characters have round mouths and suddenly this character has like a super sharp mouth? Like it's fine if that's like your universe and your rules, but it also makes us think like, did they know that they were doing that? Like, did they know that that one character has a different mouth? Like, it's just, again, it's just stuff to like, it's good to practice with your own work, and make those decisions and be like, what are the rules of my universe? Well, you know, it's almost, oh, no, we have 10 more minutes. I was like, what else can I keep talking about? Because there's so much. Maybe I'll show you, because we have like 10 more minutes. So I'll show you just really, this is like my week 1 stuff for my character design class. So we kind of like go over the lesson plan. I talked briefly about like before the first episode and what happens the rest of the season. Stuff we kind of talked about briefly. But basically, these are the stuff that are going to be expected of you to do for the pilot and before the first episode, which is like rotations, expression sheets of the main cast, kind of what I showed you, so that the board artists, when they start boarding it, they'll have this stuff all ready to go. But, you know, every show is a little different. Some shows are like, we have zero money for this, so we're just going to start the episode and we have to do all of this at the same time and hope that the board artists do everything right and on model and nobody gets mad at each other, and that just never works out. This is like a really important period of the show, of like getting time, like character designers getting enough time to do like all of the lineups and rotations and mouth charts and style guides. It just makes the show look better and nicer, and you have more time to prepare. So we did that. We just did that. I'm going to show you, yeah, here's some stuff. There's like that Powerpuff Girl reboot that I worked on for a bit. So here's an example of like some storyboards that like really were quite off model. And this was a show that was like, no, like you got to draw those girls like super on model. So this board artist like to draw their bodies like so big and chunky, and we had to like super shrink down their bodies, which, you know, the first few episodes of this show, like it was really hard because the board artists like weren't quite getting it, and then the animators would like literally trace this and we'd be like, no, their bodies are huge. They had to be tiny. So we had to have like a lot of talks with the board artists being like, it's too much work for the character designers to like literally draw this for like every single scene. You have to draw more on model. Same here. It's not terrible, but her body's like huge, and like in her model sheet, like her body's like pretty small. So, you know, it changes this like pose a little bit. So this is like, you know, it's, I don't mind doing this. I think it's fun, but it definitely adds like more work than needs to be if the board artist just kind of like knew where to like shrink it a little bit. You know, same here, not terrible, but this is like way more appealing and like way more on model. Like look how big her hand is and how small her body is, and it's not great. Here too, where it's like, again, if this was like Star versus the Forces of Evil, like you saw how rough those boards were, this would be okay. But for, again, for this show, because like they were literally tracing those board drawings, like we would have gotten this back and we would have been like, no, her body's super weird. So I had to like go in and like make everything super, super tiny and cute, because this was just too rough. Like here's an example of something we got back where like, I think because the board artist just didn't draw in the lines in their eyes, so this came back with like her eyes completely black, which is like a little scary looking. So I had to go in and do the paint over and show them like, no, sorry, it has to be like this. But again, this is like something that probably could have been avoided on our end, like with boards and with other stuff where you have to kind of put in these details so the animation studio doesn't just guess and they don't really like know. Here's another one where this is what came in and it's just like, oh, that's just so weird looking. I'm sure the board artist drew this and drew it like this and it looked super cute in boards, but in animation it looks like she's wearing glasses, but she's not. So I had to draw this. And also, this is usually something the art director does, but I was kind of like this weird hybrid position thing. So I was doing stuff like this, which was kind of fun, actually. Again, here too, where it's like, oh no, the board artist drew it like this, and we thought it looked cool in boards, and it doesn't look good. So now we got to like fix it. And, you know, it costs time and money. It's all painted already. Like they're going to have to go in and fix all of this, and it delays everything. So, like, it's funny, like that, like one little hiccup from like months ago that didn't get caught really because it was just looked cute in boards suddenly becomes like an issue when it's animated and painted. And then that's when like schedule gets crunchy and everything gets like a little scary and you start getting yelled at that everything's taking too long. Yeah, another example where the animation came back and it's like her eyes are like looking down, but like look how much black is like here. Like they kind of weren't quite understanding. This probably wasn't the border's fault, but I think they just weren't understanding like, oh, when she looks down, like you have to make the whole eye look down. Like this looks crazy. This looks like she's actually like looking down and looking at something. And then I also had to fix her body because it was way too big. That was probably the border's fault for drawing their body super big. But yeah, it's hard as a border artist like to draw like 1 circle, 2 circles, 3 circles for every single drawing. So they were just kind of keeping it a little looser, but that leaves a lot more mistakes to happen like this. Here's another example of me having to explain how Blossom's bangs worked because these all look terrible. Like there's no curve and they're all spaced the same here. Here they're just like straight across and tiny, and they're supposed to be a little more curved. Here there's way too much forehead and look how straight they are and weird, and same here. So this happens a lot on season 1, just helping the studios get the hang of it, get the hang of drawing these characters. Oh, here's another example of just some Bible stuff that they put in that I found. Here's some star ones of, yes, we like these mouths. No, we hate these pointy little mouths. Please don't do that. Please don't do a line in the middle. If we ever did that, Darren would be not happy with you. She didn't like that. And same here. Unless maybe it was like a super funny special post drawing and it was like a one-off, but generally these are the rules of the show. Oh yeah, here's me explaining some stuff about her body. Oh, this is too big. Please don't do this. Say more about her bangs. It's all very technical, but that's also a part of the job of character designer, which is really fun, is like really getting into those nitty-gritty details. Okay, 5 minutes left, but you know what? I'm gonna stop talking because there's so many questions and I want all these questions to be answered. So I'm going to stop sharing. Get to see my big face. Okay, I'm gonna start answering these questions one by one. I'm gonna do my best. And I hope everyone's good. I hope everyone's enjoying this. I haven't been looking at the chat at all. Okay, cool. Look. I hope everyone's enjoying this talk so far. Okay, so can you talk more about the show pitch that was declined? Maybe even explain the pitch Bible you submitted and why you think it got declined. You're gonna make me relive my trauma. Well, so the show I pitched was called Puppy Mystery. You know what? Maybe I'll just I don't know if I could show it. They still own it, even though they just put it in a shelf. So sometimes if I show, like, I get nervous about that because, like, if I show stuff and it's recorded and then some people like screen cap it and then share it and then I get in trouble. Which is the downside of pitching stuff that you love to studios, because if they reject it, then you never get to share it and you never get to, unless you get the rights back, but that's really hard to do. So it was declined. There's a lot of different reasons, I think. I'll never know for sure because I wasn't in those meetings, those rooms, but it was, a show that had 2 female lead characters. And I was, a younger first time showrunner. And I think the studio, this was in 2019. So I think the studio was still at a place of like, who are we? What are we doing? We have all new leadership. And, they went with Middlemost Post instead, which is super funny, super cute show. It does feel familiar. It's a bit more SpongeBob-y. All the people who worked on it were SpongeBob people, and mine was really new and different and a different voice. And I think maybe it was a bit more of a risk and they just weren't in the right place to do that. And maybe having female lead characters was not, maybe they wanted more boy audience shows, even though it was like super action packed and super cool. And we tested on little kids and little boys loved it. So I'm going to be a little salty about that one because I think it would have been an amazing show. But you never know, maybe in 5 years they dig it up out of the dirt closet they put it in and are like, hey, we still like this one. That's what happened with Pinko Banana Cricket. It was like dead and then they like revived it and then killed it again. Okay. Explain the pitch Bible you submitted. Yeah, usually for development, like usually you'll submit like you'll have a couple of meetings with like some Disney or Nickelodeon executives and you'll pitch like a pretty small document that has like some images and we'll have like here's my story, here's my characters, here's the show, like really brief. And then if they really, really like it and they want to put money into it, then they'll like option it from you. So once like money's involved, then they have notes and then they're putting their own money into it. So they'll hire more artists or maybe they'll hire storyboard artists to like do a proof of concept. And so, I mean, every studio is so different the way they do this. At the time, Nickelodeon was doing a thing called like an overall deal, which means like I only work on my development for a year. I don't work on any shows. I don't work on anything else. I just work on my show full time, which is like super cool. It's crazy that you get to do that. It's a blessing and a curse a little bit. I find because that whole year you're working on this show you're developing, that's a year that you're not working in the industry. Like you're technically not working like on actual shows that are actually being aired. So there's just kind of just this like blip in my resume for like a year that's like, oh yeah, I was working on my own thing that's like you can't see and I can't show anybody and it doesn't exist, but I worked on it and I directed it and I did all this work for it, but I have nothing to show for it. So it could be tricky, especially some people have like 2-year overall deals or 3-year overall deals or 4-year overall deals, and that's 4 years that you're not having credits. And a lot of people want to see like, oh cool, like she's worked on this show or he's worked on that show or they worked on like all different kinds of things instead of like just this like nothingness in your resume that you can't have nothing to show for, which is very frustrating. Okay, next question. What would you say to someone who is nervous to go into the animation industry due to constant issues that happen? No pay over time, issues with doing more than expected in your given role. Well, I would say that every production is very different, and sometimes you'll go into productions that are very healthy and have a lot of very, very good people on them and are very respectful of your time and your schedule and know how long it takes to, do a character design or do storyboards or do everything, and they give you enough time to do it. I will say once you join the union, so if you got hired on Amphibia, that's a union show, and eventually you would accumulate enough hours. I think it's like 600 hours, which is, goes by pretty fast when you're full time. So once you hit 600 hours, you're like officially in the animation union, and they like will protect you, which means like if you're a union show, you can't do overtime with no pay. Like you can't do it. Like you have to email the union, and then they'll be like, absolutely not. Like it just doesn't really happen in union jobs. Like there are artists who feel like they have to like, work overtime or like work on weekends, like because like sometimes it could be personal stuff where you're like, oh, like I really didn't get that scene right. Like I really want to get it right, like for my portfolio. And like, I really care about this. I'm just going to spend like a couple more hours. Like it's fine. Like a lot of us do that because we just love drawing and love animation so much. Because like, it, again, some people like we're trying to crack down on that stuff also, just because it sets a precedent that like you have to spend your extra hours not being paid to make something more beautiful. Like, but sometimes it happens if I was like distracted all day watching YouTube and I was like, oh no, I didn't do anything today. I work better at night. I'll just do this till later tonight. Like, I'm not going to be like, you owe me overtime hours. Like it's a bit flexible in that way, as long as you hit your deadlines. So, I think like, again, our community is pretty, like once you're on a show, like you're part of that like team, and you have coworkers that like are going to work with you and protect you, and like you're not just like alone on an island anymore. Like, and then there's people you could, again, you have a union to complain to. So that's what I would say if you're nervous about all of that stuff, is that there's always going to be somebody to talk to and to help you, and that you're not completely alone defending yourself when it comes to that. Okay, next. I hope I'm answering everyone's questions right. And if you want more detail, just text me in the thing. What was it like in your first gig working in the industry, freshly graduated? How did you adapt in moments you may have felt overwhelmed? Yeah, so my first job ever was at a small studio called 6 Point Harness. This was like while Star was being, like I was working on development for Star, but it wasn't officially greenlit yet. So that was like an interesting, job, because like it wasn't really like on a show. It was just like at this small studio that did like lots of little jobs. So I kind of got to like put on different hats. But then once I got like the Disney job, where I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm officially a character designer, like on a show. It was a little scary at first, especially being like Darren Nefsey was a first-time showrunner, and she was a woman, which was a little more unheard of at that time, to be like a young woman showrunner. It just didn't quite happen as often. And she wanted a crew that also was like, young and not young. We had like different ages on the show, but she definitely like knew what she liked and wanted somebody, especially for character design, to have like very similar taste to her. So that was really cool, because I felt like, oh my God, I'm given this like huge chance and opportunity. I've never done this before. So like I didn't know what like a show Bible. So like I didn't know like mouth charts. I had to like really just learn all that stuff on the fly, and like ask other people for help, but also had to like look really cool. Like I knew what I was doing. So that was like a tricky balance for the first job. And then I would have, some like Disney veterans that have been around for a while, who like maybe didn't get a job on the show that they wanted, would come up to me and be like, you, huh? Interesting. So, you have to, it's intimidating, because you're like, oh my gosh, maybe they're right. Like maybe I don't deserve this. Maybe I'm not good enough. But again, you were chosen, like I was chosen for a reason, and I know why I was chosen. And you just do the best you can, and you just like try to be more present. Like I was trying to be a lot more present and be like, okay, like don't think about all the things that could go wrong. or ways that you could get fired or mess this up, just like day by day, like enjoy that you're at Disney and you're doing this for the first time, and it's her first time too. And so that helped a lot. And then eventually after the first job, like, everybody says like, oh, the hardest part is getting your foot in the door. Like the hardest part is getting in. And once you're in, you're in. And it definitely felt like that, where I was like, okay, now that I'm like in Disney and like I'm physically here, I could like talk to, and again, I know it's different now because of, post-pandemic stuff, and a lot of stuff still isn't that in-house, but at the time, it was a lot easier to kind of like meet a lot of people. And then once you're in-house, you just hear like whispers and murmurs, and they have like these like all hand meetings where they talk about like the new shows that they're developing and the new shows that are coming up that like nobody has access to except you. So like literally like once you're in, you're like, oh, I get all this like inside information about like what shows they're about to greenlight, and I get to be like first in line to kind of try out for it. So which is, again, it makes it so much harder to break in that way, because you don't have the information when you're on the outside, and like you see like one post a year from Disney being like looking for character designers. And that's like only if everybody in-house like didn't fit the role. So you're kind of competing, when you're on the outside, you're competing with like everybody on the inside of Disney, who definitely have an upper hand, and kind of goes for all studios. But then yeah, once you kind of break in and you're in the union and like you're getting these emails, and like the union will email you about job updates too, and it feels like, okay, like I could breathe a little bit. But yeah, breaking in can be the hardest part. And yeah, how I adapted, I don't know. Sometimes I feel overwhelmed. Sometimes I still feel overwhelmed. Like I think the what's it called? Imposter syndrome. Sometimes it never goes away. But you just, as long as you keep getting jobs and keep making money and people see something in you, then like I don't get to decide for myself if I'm not good enough. Like clearly other people think I'm okay. Okay, do you get to choose how your boards are positioned, such as in 2 panels per page, or does someone else give you that information on how your board should be exported? So board artists will be boarding in Storyboard Pro. And once like, I don't know how I'm gonna ask this. Have you all seen Storyboard Pro, or like know how to use it, or have any, let me see the chat. Yeah, I have not. Yep. Okay. So yeah, so we're boarding in there, and that's just kind of like, the way it's timelined out, it's just like one panel at a time. And then we don't really care about exporting it. That's like the next phase. So what I just showed you from Star, where it was, I think it was it 2 panels? Instantly forgot. It was 2 panels per page, it looked like. I think that was just for the character designers, and the like that was more internal. Sometimes it'll get exported as just 1 panel, so when you click through it, it's like animated almost, because if it's 2 panels at a time, you don't get to see like it doesn't flow the same way. It doesn't like feel like you're watching like a single TV screen. It's like you're watching like 2 images at once. So usually when you're pitching a board, if you have to do that, it'll be just 1 panel. But that's not really like again, because you can export it from Storyboard Pro in so many different ways like that. Like you could literally be like 6 panels, 2 panels, 3 panels. It's not something that we tend to think about too much. It's more of like what production wants. Okay, have you ever had any characters who were hard or frustrating to design, redesign? Yeah, I don't like drawing robots. Like I like drawing cute little like silly robots, but like when things are like very like tech heavy, I don't love drawing that. It's very like little like machinery and details, and I find that like I don't like it. It just, I just find it really difficult for me. Compared to like a flowy dress or like I like more kind of like organic shapes that just like I don't know. I like a robot is just so like perspective, like if the perspective is off, it's just like, oh, it just looks terrible. Don't like that. I don't like sometimes like there were some characters in Star the first season that were like so detailed. Like I think when Miss Skolnick turns into a troll, like she has like a million little like lumps and bumps and things, and like you have to kind of keep track of all that, like in the rotation, and you have to count like every little like bump on her face and make sure that when like her face is from this to this, that like all the bumps rotate. It's just tedious, and I don't find it that fun. How do you create new unique characters for a show that pertains to the show style without making the characters look too similar to each other? I mean, I think that definitely depends on the type of show. Like sometimes the show, like they really want all the characters to kind of look pretty similar. Like let's say all the human girl characters in Amphibia, like Marcy and Sasha and Anne, like they have pretty similar body types for the most part. Like they have like their big, cute, like Sasha's head's a little more oval, but like you can kind of see the arena that to play in, where it's like you can't, if you're going to do like another kind of like female character in that, let's say like there was another one added, like you wouldn't do something like crazy, like, oh, and she has like giant arms, or like she's like, like you would keep it pretty similar, and like maybe like push the face a little bit or push the hair in a certain way, or like maybe make the eyes like a little different. But I think like there's ways of making a character pretty unique with like simple things that are added and changed, like especially when like the color comes in and makes it really pop. But yeah, I think it's like, again, like knowing the rules of the show. So like on Star, when I got to do, there's like a Bounce Lounge episode, which is like one of my favorites, because Darren was just like, go crazy, like just draw crazy background characters, do whatever you want. So I really got to kind of lean into my style that I like. And like I did this like boy with like kaleidoscope eyes, and I did like cute girls who were lounging with like cute hair. So I got to really like do what I liked, but then bring it back into the show style and being like, okay, like if I'm gonna give this boy kaleidoscope eyes, like how do I do that works in this universe? Like I can't make it too detailed, or like I can't make a character that if you saw it you'd be like, oh, like that looks like that's from the show Avatar, The Last Airbender, like that doesn't look like a like. So I think it's a fun, I think that's one of the funnest parts of being a character designer, is like getting to like seeing how far you could push something like in the realm of that universe design wise. But it's about like really knowing the rules of the world. Yeah. For timing, does animating change the way the storyboard is presented? I think it depends. Again, like Teen Titans Go, they time out their storyboards because they get all the voices recorded beforehand. So when it's called like a radio play, so you put that in your storyboard profile, you have like the full, like what everybody's saying, like the full episode in your file. And then like, if Robin is like, oh my gosh, Star, why did you do that? Like, exactly the timing between like, oh my God, Starfire, to why did you, like, you could really like play with that timing quite a bit. Whereas like on Star, we didn't have the voices recorded yet. Like that happened way after. So there's only so much board artists can do timing wise, because we weren't actually like timing to anything. We were just timing to like our own kind of comedy, which might completely change once it goes into animatic, and once it goes to the voices are put on, like maybe the voice for Star like read it in a different way that like changed everything, that Darren liked even better than the way it was boarded. So yeah, it just depends on the pipeline of the show. Next question. Do you prefer Canada's animation industry or US animation? You won't break our hearts if you say Canada. I think the US, I gotta say. I'm not just saying that. I think Canada has amazing animation here. For the majority, we're kind of like the outsourced studio. And this was kind of a big thing on Frog and Toad because we were working at Titmouse US and Titmouse Canada. So we were like two halves of the same studio. And our amazing supervising director, Sarah Johnson, was like, you cannot talk to Canada that way. Like, there's a bit of a precedent sometimes where the US will, like, you know, talk kind of badly to like the outsourced studios like Korea or Canada or Ireland and just be like, oh, like they're so bad, they're so terrible, they don't know what they're doing, like they're idiots. And it's not really true. It's just like, well, we're working on like a much stricter timeline than you are, and we get paid less, we don't have unions like you do. Like, it like there has to be some kind of like, I think, communication and respect back and forth that sometimes isn't there. But on Frog and Toad, it was very much like, no, like they're not lesser than us. Like they are the equal parts of us. And if something goes wrong, like you do not yell at them, like, which I thought was like really beautiful. And I think it made everybody happy and it made everybody feel like we were all part of the same team and not just like the grunt workers for the US. But the thing I do like about working in Canada is the healthcare, which is nothing to do with animation. But like if I lost my job or if I needed, like you get insurance through like the union. So if I don't get any union work, then I eventually lose my union insurance. And then I'm like, well, what am I gonna do? Like they have things to help you out, but like in Canada, if I'm like, cool, I lost my job, or I actually just want to freelance for a bit, I'll be okay. I don't have to like freak out about insurance. So it's, it takes away some stress, but then we just I don't think we get paid as much as the US does. Okay, that was a big answer. It seems as though you, as a character designer, had to do a lot of work that I'd imagine the animators had to do. Are animators in charge of anything else other than putting the characters into motion? Yeah, like I think they have their own animation directors on in the animation studios. So like they'll, talk about like timing and like they'll add like little flourishes and stuff like that. I mean, ideally, I think it would be really nice if storyboards didn't have to be so on model and actually gave a lot more trust to the animation studios to kind of like really put their stamp on it. But that costs more time and money and has more room for mistakes. But when you watch stuff like Dexter's Lab or original Powerpuff Girls or a lot of those like OG shows, like if you see the storyboards for those shows, they're like 2 drawings for like this huge scene. And then the animators just kind of had to put in their own stuff, which led to some mistakes, but then some of the mistakes were like kind of beautiful and they kept those in. So there is this like, I don't know, there's just like a different quality. Some of those like 90s, early 2000s cartoons where like things are just like a little wonky and like a little off, and each episode's like animated maybe a little differently. But I don't know, I just think that like they're really charming, and now everything has to be like so on model and like so perfect, and like and it's just because of budget and money and time. And so yeah, I mean, again, it would be cool if the animators got to like really add some beautiful stuff there, and that would kind of make boards a little easier. We won't have to draw everything like super on model and pose everything out. But again, depends on the show, depends on the studio. I'd say most now are just telling animators exactly what to do, so there's no mistakes and no guessing to be made. What kind of custom brushes do you use for character design line art? Is that more about like me personally what I use or for a show, because like on a show we all have to use the same tools, and for Star it was just like because like it was going to be drawn over anyway, like it was going to, like Big City Greens, the first few seasons were actually traditional, so like they would just use like a really beautiful like pen and they actually like brought us some of those pens back from Korea, which was really nice, and I was like, oh my god. But the digital studios, they use like sometimes like a super thin crisp line. On our end it doesn't quite matter as much because again it's going to be redrawn anyway and traced over, but probably just like a standard like Photoshop, just thick to thin line, unless you're on a show that's like, no, it must be a squiggly, like a crunchy line. For my own personal work, I hate drawing really clean. I think it's just because I've been boarding so much and I've just run out of, my brain just can't like focus anymore. So I love like very like loose, like I don't tend to love like really crisp thin to thin lines. Like I'm getting more and more into brushes that are like there's no thick and thin to it actually. And I used to hate those and now I like love them because now I'm like, ooh, like I can't lean on the beauty of the cleanup anymore. Like I just have to like it's fully has to be like my skill involved and my drawing has to like shine through more than the line weight, because sometimes beautiful line weight and cleanup can kind of like be a bit of a cheat if you're like really good at it. That's how I feel about my personal work. I also just again don't have patience for beautiful lines, but there's just something so like simple about just being like chunky, like one line. No, it's like I don't have to like do like these beautiful strokes like a million times. What kind of backgrounds will the animation studios draw? Whoops, sorry. I just have to check this text really quickly. I have somebody coming in. Okay, it's all good. Okay, what kind of backgrounds will the animation studios draw? Like for extreme close-ups or more than that? Yeah, I'd say like if we have a scene that takes place like in the kitchen, we'll give them like main locations, like here's the kitchen wide, like here's a couple more shots of the kitchen, but you know, if it is like a close-up shot near the window of the kitchen, like we'll let them take care of that, and just like they'll have to kind of match the style. Or if it's like a close-up of the ground or like the sky, it tends to be more close-ups, or maybe like very far away shots. But yeah, usually the studio will supply them with like a ton of reference, so they don't have to like guess too much. But yeah, it's mostly like the in-between background shots. Like it won't be like the money shot of like the most like beautiful epic. Like usually the harder ones we'll do on our end. How clean must storyboard lines be, especially for 2D animation? I noticed Star versus the Forces of Evil is more on the sketchy side, whereas Amphibia is a lot cleaner. Yes, this depends on the show. It's definitely more common now. Like I think 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 10 years ago, it was like, yeah, draw messy, draw loose, draw like feature, draw like, you don't need to draw super on model. And now because they want everything shorter schedule and shorter budget, they want storyboards to be like very on model now. And so that means they took away like the layout job, which is like usually what used to happen after boards. It would go to layout and somebody would like, you know, put all the scenes and make them all nice and put some of the characters like on model and fix all the boards up and make them beautiful. Now that kind of got condensed into one job, which is just storyboard artist. And it's something that we're actually pushing back on quite a bit because it's kind of getting really out of hand and it's really burning out a lot of board artists. And like the expectations now of like in 5 weeks, draw a full like 11-minute episode and pose it out, which is like they're almost asking us to be like key animators now, which wasn't the case even 5 years ago. And now they're asking us to like and draw it super on models, so like there's no mistakes ever, so we don't have to pay for any mistakes. And it's just a lot of work. It's really, really hard. But again, not all shows are like that. If if the studio has the time and the money and the budget, then they'll be like, yeah, like boards could be. And also, yeah, for a CG show, they're a little more lenient as well, because all the models are done in CG and everything, so they're not gonna like trace our drawings in any way. But yeah, it sucks, because I think we should be able to draw sketchy and loose and fun, and it shouldn't all be put on the board artist to like do 3 jobs in one just because it's cheaper. I think that's why the industry is like suffering a little bit. But yeah, depends on the show you're on. Okay. On what cases would you say it would be okay to break general design rule regarding your own Bible, if any? Oh, I mean, you could break whatever rules you want. I mean, if it's your personal stuff and your show Bible, like you make up all the rules you want. If you're like, yeah, sometimes they have round mouths, sometimes they have pointy mouths, like that's what I want. That's like, yeah, okay, like own it. Sure. I think it's like it gets a little wonky when like that show Drawn Together. Do you remember that? It was like an adult show where it was like all different styles, like Betty Boop and kind of anime-ish, and like the like Teen Titans Go, like they all live in the same universe. It was like a reality TV show that was animated. Like that's kind of its own thing, but like sometimes I feel like if like one of your designs is like super, super round and Betty Boopish, and then your next character is like really, really hard lines and everything like edgy, is like, yeah, maybe that's like I don't know. It feels more like a mistake than it is intentional. Like I think there are ways to like make a character like have nice curves more than another character be angly, but like Gendy Tartakovsky, I think, does like a really, really good job of this, of like really like pushing shapes and using like harder edges and softer like more round lines for like to express like a character's features without it feeling like it's a different style or different show. So I think it's like knowing how to like rein it in and knowing how to like put like a filter over all of it that's like unifies it all. Like sometimes I think when people think like too designy, they kind of like forget like to step back and look at the big picture and like look at everything and be like, oh, does this all work together? Like if one character has like very, very, very detailed hair and then the next character has just like the same kind of hair but less detailed, like why? Like why? Like how come? Like what's the purpose of that? Sure. Is it like story decision, or I don't know. Is it because you just didn't think about it too much? Like it's just little things that I tend to notice, and I think other character designers tend to notice too, is like if it makes you question something, then maybe it's something to kind of go back to and think about. Okay. Is everybody good? No one's bored of hearing me talk? And yeah, rules are meant to be broken. I think I love breaking rules. I think it's just like knowing how many to break and when, and I don't know. Break any rules you want. I don't know what I'm saying. Change my mind. Okay. What got you interested in character design over storyboarding? So yeah, I entered the industry being like, I am only going to do character design forever. That's all I want to do. Nothing else. I was not interested in boards, was not interested in anything else. And then once I had a few shows under my belt, I was like, oh, I really like, I guess I thought originally I wasn't good enough to do storyboards. I went to Sheridan College and that felt like kind of the story that was told to us was like, oh no, like only geniuses are like storyboard artists, like you got to be like next level. And then once I entered TV and like I saw how it was being done, and I saw like the drawings and like how fun and loose and like how like I loved it. I loved the energy of it. And I just was feeling like, oh, I think there's a lot more, because I was pitching my own shows as well. It's a bit more studios just tend to like gravitate more towards writers and storyboard artists as showrunners and show pitchers rather than designers, which is silly, I know, but it doesn't always happen. But the majority of showrunners that get stuff made are usually come from boarding or writing. And I was feeling like, oh well, you know, the next level of character design usually is art director, and I didn't really care about art directing at all, but I really cared about show pitching and directing seemed really fun. So I made that pivot where, and also when you're doing boards, like kind of like how I showed you, like those background characters for Star, like of Goose, like when Gustav was at the door and they opened the door, like that board artist Carrie got to design all those characters. And you know, maybe she didn't care about it or didn't put thought into it, but as a board artist, like you get to do that. You get to be like, cool, like I'm going to design these background characters. You can keep them if you want, but like if you draw super on model and style of the show and you draw super cute background characters, it's most likely the character designer will be like super inspired by that and keep it in. So I was like, I feel like I get the best of both worlds a little bit there. And so that's why I made that leap. What advice do you have for somebody who wants to pitch a show? I guess like know what studio you're pitching to and what kind of stuff they make, and like make, I guess having a show Bible that, oh, there goes my dog. I'll show you my dog in a bit. She just woke up from her nap. So I think like having like a really strong vision of like what you want. And I think a lot of Bibles that I see sometimes focus too much on like world building and being like, look how cool this like world is, but like look at all these like, look at this lore of this world, and like isn't it cool, like this part of the world's in space and this part's like in this like cool like mushroom jungle, and like that stuff's super cool and you should always have it in there. But I think it's like so easy for us as artists to kind of like hyper focus on that, of like the coolness of it, because like we're such a visual people and like that's what excites us. But what excites, like when you're pitching, like you're not pitching to other artists, you're pitching to like executives who are very like business brained, and they want like, what's the elevator pitch of this, like tell me the show in 2 sentences, like what's the vibe of it, who is it for, what's your audience, like is this for preschool, is this for older kids, like who are your characters, like that, like in a nutshell. And like just really like knowing all of that stuff like off the bat, and like knowing like this is the theme of the show, like this is I'm trying to think of like a good example, like this is like if Rugrats met Broad City, it's like really sassy babies and then the execs are like, oh yeah, sassy babies, I like Broad City, like I get it. Like you kind of have to be like a little bit like, hey, like I'm bitching, and then you know, once you get them on board, and you know, again, and it has to have like story and heart and like why you're making this, and why this show, and why now, and what are you trying to say, and you know, it has to have all of that too, of course. But I think that's my biggest piece of advice, is like don't get too caught up in like, but like look at all these like cool character designs I did, and look at all like these cool world building I did. Like that stuff is inevitably going to come later, but it doesn't, sometimes it makes like these execs kind of gloss over a little bit, or like makes them think like, well, like are you really, and do you understand like what like Nickelodeon needs right now? Like Nickelodeon doesn't need like another like show about like a kid that has like cool wind earth power. It's like you're gonna compete against Avatar, like they want something that like feels like their brand, but also like nothing they've ever seen before, which is a really, really hard target to hit. So yeah, I could talk about show pitching and show Bibles for like ever. I should do like a whole separate talk about that because it's like its own art form in itself. But I'm going to keep answering these questions. I know this is a big question, but how do you go about researching and simplifying faces, hair, style, clothes, and body types? How do you make a main character stand out from a supporting character versus a background character? I guess like let's say you do have an episode of Star that you're working on, and or like an episode of a show that's like takes place at like a gala or like a ball, and maybe the ball's in space, or like, you know, like I think once you get like keywords of like what you need for like a design, then it's easier to kind of be like, cool, like ball gowns. Then you go on like Pinterest or whatever, and then like you see all this like inspiration. Yeah, I tend to look at like Instagram for like inspiration, and Pinterest, and I mean Pinterest is kind of getting taken over by AI right now, which is unfortunate, but there's just like a lot of places where you can kind of like get really inspired by like different hairstyles and different costumes and clothes and body types. I think looking at like real photos versus like other people's artwork, I think can really help you hone in on your own style. Like there's nothing wrong with looking at other people's artwork. I think it's like very, very inspiring. But I think like if you really are working on like your own voice and vision, then looking at photos of like different cool hair that you like, or like different like dresses or different like outfits that inspire you, like then you're not so much like being inspired by this the already simplified version of that. Like you're getting inspired, like you're making up your own version of like a beautiful dress that you saw like a photo of. You know what I mean? It's like one less degree of like separation between like you and the thing that you're inspired by. So and then yeah, for body types, it's like photos, man. Like have you ever seen that like people have been reposting it where it's like all of the different types of athletes all lined up, and like it's crazy, like it's so beautiful, like you could see like what like a ballet dancer looks like next to like a swimmer, next to like a tennis player, and just how different their bodies are, and it's so cool. So yeah, I just tend to be inspired by that. And then yeah, I guess it depends, like you don't want background characters to be like outshining your main character. um but you know, in cartoons, it's I don't know, like I think yeah, like depends on the scene. Like if you have a beautiful gala scene, then yeah, like maybe some of the it's usually like color helps with this a lot. Like I think like if you're drawing lots of beautiful dresses, you don't have to be like, well, the main character needs like the most beautiful detailed dress of all, and then the other characters just get like straight dresses that are nothing. Like of course like everyone's going to have like beautiful dresses, but color and lighting can help with that. Like if they push all of those kind of get background characters a bit more muted, and then your main character is like like bright pink or like just like a really, really bright color, and maybe there's more shadows in the background, less detail in the dresses. But I'd say like, you know, I think to make like a show super interesting, like you don't want the background characters to be like too boring or too nothing, because then it doesn't feel like a real like lived in kind of show. Sometimes it's like sometimes background characters become very, very popular and become main characters. This happened to me on Star, where Jackie was just a background character. Not Jackie, sorry. What's her name? She has like Jana. Her name's Jana. She's actually wearing, if anybody knows the show Ed, Edd and Eddy, Double D is like my favorite character ever, and he has this like black hat that he wears, and she's wearing that exact hat because I love him so much. And board artists and Darren just started really liking this character, and they kept putting her more and more and more in episodes. And I mean, I didn't find that she was like very particularly like interesting. She's just wearing like a black hat and like boots and a skirt. Like she was just kind of like a whatever character, but for some reason she just became really, really popular and became kind of like part of the main cast. So you never know. It just kind of happens naturally sometimes. Yeah, the beanie girl. Yeah. Another little like behind the scenes. Not a question, but Van started teaching here and he says very nice things about you. Ah, thank you. That's very sweet. He's a nice guy. How do you get to propose your own show? Like, do you have to work at the studio already, or can you just pitch a show? Yes, I'd say if you're not working at a studio, it's a little harder to start pitching shows to them. Like if you're, let's say like if you work at Nickelodeon, then usually you have to pitch to Nickelodeon first because you're under contract with Nickelodeon. And if you work at Nickelodeon and start pitching a show to Disney, their competitor, without showing Nickelodeon first, it's super taboo and not good. And don't do that. But let's say you haven't worked at any studio before. It can be a little tricky to kind of get that trust from them, because like not only are they like, well, you've never like worked in the industry before, like no. But that's why they do, a lot of these places have like shorts programs and stuff. Like usually that's kind of like an open call. And usually when it's an open call for a short submission, or like if it's like, hey, portfolio, like come talk to us, like we're going to be at Comic-Con, like come show us your ideas, like those are great places to do that. And then yeah, once you're like at a studio for a little bit, let's say you've been working on a show for like a couple of months and you're like, oh, I just have this great idea that I know would like be so good here at Disney or Nickelodeon or wherever, then you would make a meeting with their development department and just be like, you know, it's really, everyone's pretty nice. You could kind of just like ask and be like, who works in development? Like who are the development executives? And you could just ask around, they'll just tell you, or you could like walk by their desk. Or usually like if you're just all in line, usually people will know who the development executives are. Or sometimes Disney even like emails people and they're like, hey, we're looking for in-house pitches. Then you set up a meeting and that's a lot easier. And then once you've been in the industry for a while, then you can get an agent. I have an agent. It took me a while, but I have one. And then they will pitch stuff for you, or they will bring people to you, which helps quite a bit. It's nice to have an agent kind of. Some people don't like them. Some people are like, no, I don't want an agent pitching my stuff for me. So I get it. Okay, when working overtime, you mean in studio or at home as well? I guess like, you know, you have a set amount of hours. It's usually like 9 to 5, about, or 10 to 6. And if like, let's say you did all your work, you're on time, everything's going well, like, you know, no sick days, and then suddenly like the showrunner is like, I hate this episode, I hate this scene, we have to redo it. That's not your fault. That you did everything right, you did all your work, you hit the deadlines, you're handing things in every day. It's something like above you that's messing up the schedule. Usually then they will give you overtime and they'll be like, yeah, look, like it wasn't your fault, like we changed like a whole bunch of stuff, can you work like overtime to like get this done for Friday, we know it's Wednesday. So yeah, that will usually happen. Sometimes overtime is like, it happens to me where like, oh, I slept in, I was feeling tired, I partied too hard the other night, I rolled into work a little, let's say it's online, I rolled into work a little late, I kind of putzed around for a while. I should probably, instead of working from like 9 to 5, I'll work from like starting at 4 o'clock till the end of the day. And then, you know, I don't have any deadlines today, but I'll hand some stuff in tomorrow. Like sometimes I adjust my schedule based on that. And so I'm not really like, I'm not going to ask for overtime. I just like push my schedule down a bit. easier when you're working from home. When you at a studio, if you show up at 4 o'clock, they're going to be like, are you okay? Where were you? But again, like I think with animation, there's wiggle room for, it's not like you have to hand in this many boards a day or this many drawings a day. It's kind of like some days you'll have a ton of stuff done, some days you'll have a little less done. It's as long as you again hit like the main deadline, that's what's most important. Okay, I'm gonna answer more questions. I hope everybody's still happy and awake and enjoying this. I'm talking into a void, so I I'll read the comments after. What would you say to somebody that is struggling to get into the industry? Yeah, that's a tough one because I struggled a lot to get into the industry, and especially being from Canada and trying to like break into the US industry, which is like I needed visas and really I needed to get like visas and all this extra stuff, which makes it harder. You're all American, that's not as hard for you. Unless maybe some of you aren't, I don't know. So I was like at my breaking point when I was trying to break in, where I was like, forget it. I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like I was getting like rejection after rejection after rejection, and like I didn't understand why, and I was like doing all I could. I was like networking and it was just like I can't do this anymore. So I started like applying to like video game studios and stuff, and like it's tricky because like sometimes some people just get plucked right out of school and like they didn't even graduate and they already like working at Disney, and then other times it's like you tried for like 3 years to break in, and everyone's like journey is different, everyone's paths are different. I actually went to a fine art university after college, and I dropped out because I hated it so much, and then I went back to school to Sheridan, and I was like on the older side with all these like kids that were like, I just got out of high school, and I'm like, oh my god, I've been to university, like I've been drinking way longer than all of you. Some people like weren't even drinking age yet. So it was like that felt like hard on my ego, but it's also kind of like, well, this is my journey and this is my path, and like it was kind of nice having that like university experience and like not freaking out about like homework and deadlines, and like everything is subjective, but it's like just keep applying, just keep trying. I'd say like it's okay to have side jobs and like I think it's always good to still have like real life experience. Like I worked at a grocery store in a cart, like a Hallmark. I worked at retail. I've done a lot of stuff, and like it's not invaluable. Like all of that experience, even if it's not like I'm not drawing for a living, like I'm still dealing with like deadlines and well, deadlines like in its own weird way, but like schedule stuff and working the cash and money stuff and closing on time and doing like you still have or gaining some of the same qualities that you need that will carry over into animation, and like having a boss and showing up and being told what to do. So I know there's some stigma online, it feels like, where it's just like, oh, if I'm not doing an art job full time, then like am I really an artist, or like am I really making it? And like I just say like screw all that. Like experience is experience, and like when you meet new people and you have like for better or for worse, even like bad experiences at jobs, like that still gives you like stories, and like it's like it helps you like even with like character design to be like, oh my gosh, like there's this one crazy dude, I'm gonna like draw a character based off of him, I'm gonna like add him to this story. Like all of it means something. You can use all of that, but yeah, just hang in there. It's a really weird time now, I gotta say. Like there are like industry pros that are like looking for work, so don't be too hard on yourself like right now if you've been like applying or like you're like nervous about applying. It all kind of like ebbs and flows. And I'd also say my other piece of advice is like while you're if you don't have like if you have like the means to do it, or like if you're not like super tied down to the US, like go work in other places in the world. Like go try like some places, like sometimes like Ireland or like Australia, or like they will, take you in as like, if you're just like a recent graduate, or like you're still in school, like you have kind of like a year or two of that like special time of still being like a student, like post grad, where they'll be like, cool, like we'll get you a visa, like we'll come here and train you. I think having like any kind of studio experience like is still better than no studio experience, like for your resume in those regards. So it's like some people are like, no, like I just have to work at Disney or Pixar, or I just have to work like at a big studio, and like that doesn't always matter that much. Like it's always great to have, but like if you've worked at like, cool, like I did like boarding and character design and revisions and this, like at all these different like studios, and some were like around the world, or some were here for a bit and some were there, like that looks awesome. Like I'd say like go do that, go try and do it. Like I kind of wish I did it a little more also, because now I'm old and tired. um but that's my long spiel about that. Okay, I'm gonna, there's a couple more questions, I swear, then we're gonna be done. You guys don't have to listen to me anymore. Are other companies, oh wait, how did you break through? Okay, sorry, Brianna, this was first. I'm learning to write for animation as I am not an art major. What are some things I should learn on the art side in order to better communicate with the artists on a team? That's such a nice question. I mean, even the fact that you're thinking about that is great. I think like just watch, like, learning a little bit about storyboards, I think is more important than character design for a writer. Sometimes a board artist pet peeve will be like if a writer isn't kind of keeping track of like locations, and if they're just like Anne and Sprig are at home, suddenly like a huge fight breaks out in the forest near, like, and Anne and Sprig are like in the forest now, and you're just like, wait, what? Like how? Like I think it's so good when a writer like understands like placement of location and being like, oh, the forest is like crazy far away. Like to have the characters get from like inside of the house to the forest in one scene or for one joke like is crazy. Like so I think that just being aware of that, and also not writing like big fight scene now anyway, but like when you think a little bit more about the specifics of the fight scene, like help a lot. Like, oh, no, you don't have to like write out exactly what happens, but just giving the board artist just like a little bit of context helps, so it's not just like they fight now, figure it out. Again, really helps. And then I think the last bit of advice is like, don't put a million crowd shots and like a ton of like car chase scenes in every moment. It's just too expensive. And if you're working on a TV show, I'm talking specifically about TV, movies, do whatever you want, but for TV shows, it's like if you have like huge parade happens in a big crowd, like one scene, okay, whatever, we'll do it once an episode, but then like 2 pages later you're like, and then another crowd scene and there's a car chase and it's through a mall. And then like a page later you're like, and then there's a amusement park. See, like I think it's so easy to write it and to be like, look how exciting it is, like look how much I'm writing, it's so exciting, but to actually like sit down and have to draw it all, it's just going to get cut, or it's just too expensive, or you're just going to, it's just too much. So it's like for certain shows, like pick your main beautiful things that are going to happen, but not every page needs to be like fight scene crowd shot. I'm learning, okay, did that one already. How did you break through into your first job you mentioned? Was it networking more or through application online? For 6 Point Harness, like the smaller studio, it was, I had a bunch of friends that interned there. So when they came back, they were kind of telling me about the experience, and they were, it did help to have like friends, and then some of them got jobs at 6 Point, like after we graduated, and they would kind of like put my name in or be like, oh my gosh, like my friend would be like so good for this. So that one was through personal connections, where it was like they knew a project was coming up and they were like, oh, my friend would be perfect for this, let me recommend my friend. So I got very lucky that way. And it's also like why it's so important to like make these like really strong friendships now while you're in school as well, is like everybody's going to kind of go off and do lots of amazing things, lots of different things. They'll go into production, into writing, into this and that. And you just never know where anyone's going to end up. And it's really important to kind of like, even if you're like, oh, like they're not a good artist, like they will never make it, ha ha ha. Like if you somehow think that way, and then like you just never know, like that person could be like suddenly like a showrunner in 3 years, and you're like, wish it wasn't such a jerk to that person. Because it happens. I have seen it happen multiple times. In school, my class had Domishi in it, who just directed Turning Red. She was like my like legit classmate, and so you're just like what? Like, can you like? I can't believe it. You never know where people end up. So yeah, that's why networking is good. And then also with Star versus the Forces of Evil, we were in the time of Blogger, old school. Me and Darren were like pen pals kind of also, where I'd like write to her and be like, I think you're amazing and your style's amazing. And she's like, I like your work too. So like making those online connections is nice also, because again, like there's people who I've never met who I'm just like, oh, their work is so good, so inspiring. Like I'm gonna keep this person like in my like radar, my list, so I could recommend them. So yeah, online stuff is great too. Other companies you know of in the USA that do 2D animation, or is 2D animation outsourced into other countries? Yeah, like the actual animating of it. I think like smaller, really, really small boutique places do it in the US. Like 6 Point Harness animates in-house a lot. Sometimes Titmouse will animate in-house, or like they do it in their Vancouver studio, which I don't feel like counts as outsourcing, just because like again they're so closely tied. Pixar, but they're 3D and that's a whole other thing. But yeah, it's not that much. If you want to be an animator, it's probably the US isn't the best place to do it, just because it's just too expensive to pay US rates, which is unfortunate. Do storyboard artists get a background reference or layout reference prior to boarding, or must storyboard artists come up with the shots at the moment and background artists reference the boards? Depends. Usually for season 1, a lot of that stuff doesn't exist quite yet. And so sometimes like we don't get like by season 2, you're like, we have a full season 1 of backgrounds to pull from, which makes it easier. Season 1, it's like, cool, we have to draw this brand new location, and the background people are super busy or behind. They cannot do this work right now. So we draw it as board artists, and usually it's pretty like sketchy. Like we'll put some things in there that we think like we definitely will need for like that layout will definitely need. Like if it's like, oh, this specific like tree that looks like a very specific way is really important to this episode, like we'll draw that in a little more detail and a little more like care. But if it's just like a new location and it's at a farm, and we're like, okay, we'll just draw kind of a generic farm, and we put in grids for like the ground plane and the sky plane, and we do the best we can, but we're not background artists. That's not part of our job, even though some productions are like, you should do really nice backgrounds so the layout people or the background people just have to trace it. But again, the union really tries to like put a kibosh on that. So we'll rough it in as best we can. Ideally, it is better to get layouts that are done, or like if you're on a CG show, sometimes they have like the full thing like rendered out, like the full little town. So you just could be like, move the camera, like do however you want, and take a screenshot of it, and then just board over that, which is like beautiful. So yeah, it depends. Usually I'd say season 1, it's not as likely, but season 2, 3, 4, you'll get like tons of backgrounds to use already. Are there any portfolio tips you would give in terms of breaking in the industry? Like how you mentioned character expression sheets and hand prop rotations. Depends what type of job you want. A storyboard portfolio will mostly have your storyboards in it. And then if you want to have like, oh no, my mom's calling. Okay. If you want to have a section of your portfolio that's like sketches of like characters that I drew, or like, I think that's great. And same with a character design portfolio where you're like, I think it's really great to have like a lot of character rotations, a lot of expression sheets, a lot of like characters like interacting with each other, like giving each other a piggyback ride, or like not just like in a generic pose, but like really like showing like different angles of a character. That's really great to have. You don't necessarily need to have like a mouth chart unless it's like from a show you've actually worked on. I mean, you can have it. I think it's fine. You could do it. It's not expected of you. Or like just having like a hand sheet. It's like, it's cool to have. It's not as important as like rotations. And expression sheets and pose sheets. I think those are like the best things to have. I think sometimes if a portfolio has too much, if it's like, here's my storyboards, here's my character designs, here's my props, here's my lay, it's just like, okay, like, well, which one do you want to do more? Like what's like, you could want to do all of these equally, sure, but like, which one do you want to do 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week for a year? Like if you really don't like layout and you're like, this was so painful to do, but you have it in your portfolio, and then you get a job as a layout, as like a background artist, and you're like, no, damn it, why did I do that? I hate this. So I'd say like go for the jobs that you want, that you like your heart like kind of like explodes or like soars doing. Like again, for me, that was character design, and then I pivoted to storyboards. So then I added like a storyboard section. So my website is just, it's like character design, storyboard, and then like personal work, and that's it. No backgrounds, no painting, no other things. It's like very specific. So I think that's great to have. And if you don't know yet, and that's okay too, you can kind of explore, but I think it's again great to narrow it down. And then yeah, there's tons of character design portfolios online that you could see and be inspired from, like beautiful stuff out there. Dun, dun, dun. Did I answer that? Yeah, I think that kind of covers that for portfolio. What are the chances that they might steal your pitch ideas to make a similar show? That's a good question. I guess like when you pitch a show, I think that's why like they don't take unsolicited pitches. Like you can't just like email a studio randomly ideas, because then like let's say if they look at it and they're like, oh, this show has like a blue bear in it, and like we've been designing something with like a blue bear in it that you don't have no idea that they've been like working on, and then they release their blue bear show, and you're like, oh my god, that's my idea, I'm going to sue them, I sent them my pitch and they have a blue bear show and I had a blue bear in my show, like I'm going to sue. Like they're super scared of that. So when you do pitch something, like you're kind of coming into this like agreement, like sometimes you have to actually sign something to pitch your work, but there is like an agreement that's like, we're not going to steal your stuff, because like now we've had this formal pitch session. And they will tell you, they'll be like, we have something very similar to this right now, so we're going to reject your pitch, and we're telling you this formally, like we have a blue bear thing. So there's been some shady stuff sometimes. Like with my show, it had like 2 girls and like this cute little wolf boy, and then suddenly the next show they were developing right after mine was like two girls and a cute little wolf boy, but it was different. And you're just like, all right, fine. Like, there's things that get a little weird, but not enough to like sue, I guess. And then, as long as you have like lots of more characters and like they feel different enough, like hopefully, the studios won't take your vision or like your voice. And if they do, then you just sue them, I guess. Any advice on life in general? Oh my God. That's the biggest question of all, right at the end. Any advice on life in general, if you look back on your life and present life? I guess okay, in terms of career stuff, I wish I wasn't so mean to myself, so hard on myself. I think like if I maybe had been a little more gentle and a little more empathetic and patient, like it would have saved me a lot of mental anguish. And I guess kind of learning who is like your ally and like who's your friend, and making those like bonds that kind of last like outside of animation or like outside of the career, and making friendships that like don't just involve like, well, like we both work in animation, like kind of like friendships that transcend that. So like even if I don't work in animation anymore and I want to just teach full time, like I'm not going to lose those friends because our friendship's more important than like the jobs that we work at. I think that's really, really crucial, because I think it's so easy to put all of our value into our jobs and have the studio and the job define us and our value as like creators and artists and people. And that was like really hard for me to detangle myself from, because it feels really good when you're like, I work at Disney. My parents are really proud of me and I could hear them talking about me on the phone, and like this feels really good. And just it took me a while to learn that like that's allowed to feel good, and that's like allowed to be something you should be proud of, but that shouldn't like define my value and my worth to myself and to other people. And to kind of like find purpose outside of career as well. And that's why like I've been really into like being kinder on myself for like not always like drawing every day, and like being more experimental with my work, and just like again being proud of myself and valuing myself, not based off like what studio gave me a job. So I think going into the industry and into life with that mentality of being like jobs are important and studios are cool and important and feel good, but they're not the only thing that like defines me. And I think that'll give you like a really good rock to stand on, especially when you lose your job or like the industry isn't doing well, and then you're like, who am I if I'm not a storyboard artist or a character designer? Like you have that foundation that you built, that you're like, yeah, I'm still an artist, I'm still awesome, like I'm always going to be creating and working on stuff whether Disney hires me or not. That's my life lesson. Okay, when will you visit the USA again? I don't know, probably pretty soon. Maybe if I get another job back in the US, I don't know. It was fun. I'm kind of enjoying being in Canada right now for a bit. Just taking it easy. Okay, the last question. This is the last question, everybody. Then I'm so sorry. I've been keeping you here for like 5 hours. Okay, what are some character design storyboard artists with portfolios you would recommend checking out? This one's a bit hard. Like, do you mind if I send an email that has to Ellie that has this all listed? Because I think it's just hard for me to like off the top of my head to be like this person. But in the class I taught, there were some amazing people that like came out with these beautiful portfolios that like are exactly like character design portfolios. So I'll send that this weekend or this week, and I'll get a list, and maybe you could like circulate it. Okay, one last thing I have to show everybody. This is really important. It is my dog. I woke her up. She's so sleepy. Okay. Thank you. That's her. This is Luna. She looks like Toto. All right.
They're so precious. Oh my goodness. Ah,
She was like,
and
why did you do that to me?
so cute. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for all your time and just going through all the questions. I know there were a lot, but we really, really
No, thank
appreciate it.
you. Thank
And
you
the
so much.
beautiful life lesson.
Crying,
Amazing.
crying.
Thank you so, so much. Okay, I'm
Yeah,
gonna
you're
stop
welcome.
recording real quick, but thank you so much.